My name's Dr. Anna Whitelock and I teach early modern British history. Over the course of the lecture, I'm going to be re-examining the Tudors. In a whistle-stop 50 minutes, I'm going to be covering all 5 monarchs and re-examining some of the old questions, questioning the cliches and perhaps debunking some myths about these very popular monarchs who many people feel they know, but perhaps some of the harder questions and some of those enduring reputations haven't been questioned as much as they might. So beginning with Henry VII, we'll consider whether he was the founder of stability and a new monarch, or whether he was perhaps a monarch who survived more by luck than judgment. What was the nature of his rule? Did he leave a great legacy for his son? How, in fact, precarious was the dynasty at the time of his death? He, of course, was followed by Henry VIII, one of the most famous monarchs in English history. But Henry VIII has always been the subject of historical attention and continues to be so. So we'll be thinking, what are the new ways in which Henry's been focused upon by historians? Thinking about how he represented his authority before and after the break with Rome, his relationships with Wolsey and Cromwell, the role of his wives, and how Henry changes over the course of his reign, as indeed his girth expands. What of his ambitions? Do they remain the same? What of his foreign policy? Can we consider Henry to have actually been a successful monarch or not? Henry was followed by Edward VI, who for a long time has been little more than a footnote in Tudor history and has been paired with his sister Mary as overseeing a period of crisis in the mid-Tudor period. That now has been well and truly challenged, that view, and instead both Mary and Edward's reign have been considered from much more positive positions. Edward has no longer simply been dismissed as a boy king. Now he's seen as a king on the threshold of power who began to assert himself more and more over the course of his reign and who needs to be taken seriously as a political player. And we will think about how he went about trying to fill his father's shoes, both in image and in practice. And then, of course, he was followed by his sister Mary, who was the first woman to wear the crown of England. For so long, Mary has been acknowledged and recognised as little more than Bloody Mary, the murderer, the Catholic tyrant who burnt almost 300 Protestants. But in fact, Mary was a political pioneer. She was the first woman to wear the crown of England. She changed the law. She redefined ritual and practice and ceremony, and in many ways set important precedents for her sister Elizabeth. So we'll talk about that as well as re-examining her religious policy. Was there more to it than simply burnings? Was it actually much more enlightened than that, as some historians are now arguing? And finally to Elizabeth, Gloriana, the Virgin Queen. What of some of the truth behind that? Is Elizabeth more a monarch of style over substance? Have we been duped in many ways by continuing to think of her as ever young, ever glorious, successful? We need to think about her foreign policy, for example. The story doesn't stop with the Spanish Armada. There was in fact a great number of military disasters or certainly expeditions that were less than successful, which we need to think about. There's the argument that's now being made that actually the latter years of Elizabeth's reign were a period of decline, the whole thesis of the second reign, the 1590s. So we'll think about that too. And therefore re-examine really the highlights of the Tudor monarchy and how A-level questions perhaps might reflect these new historiographical changes, and certainly how you in your answers on your A-level paper can offer new answers and new ways of thinking about some of these old questions.